My god. Koreans are so fast when it comes to making lobbies and getting into games. They had to do vetoes too, so that was just actually so damn fast. Although I suppose the best of 5, it is only 1 veto apiece. Jeez. Alrighty, it's a TVZ. We're starting off on Parasite in the bottom right. As the yellow Zerg, it is Impact. In the top left, as the red Terran, it's Fantasy going for a CC first, which has really seemed to come back into the builder notebooks of many Terrans. I think we've seen 2, maybe 3 Korean Terrans do it. I don't think we've seen any European Terrans yet. So, yeah, it's kind of... when I first saw it, and it was, I think, the first qualifier, so the North American qualifier, it was like a live or something like that, I don't know. I was like, okay, this is... Actually, it was Gumiho. Gumiho did it first. Anyways. This makes sense. Like, what would kill this immediately is stuff like 1 base or, 2 base, no drones, I guess, Roach Ravager attacks, because, even some people don't go for Reapers with this, so there really is a lack of scouting, but when you really look at it, it's not that susceptible to earlier all-ins. It's finishes before a pool first does anything. Unless it's like a, 12 pool or something like that, 14 pool. But even then, I think a 14 pool would still finish before. So it finishes really fast, TLDR. And then you still get a Reaper at a pretty decent time. I'd have to... I guess the Reaper is something like... Well, actually, hold on here. Am I thinking of the wrong minute? Thinking of the wrong minute, maybe? I don't know. Shit. Okay, I'm not gonna say it anymore because I'm gonna sound dumb. But the point is, I think the Reaper's a little bit later, yes, but if you get it across the map, you can still see if they're going for, a reaction. They're going for the, oh, you went for a CC first? Okay, let me try and do something about it. Like, the Reaper would scout that. And then you're just going into the regular scouting necessities of a TVZ after that, right? You're going into the Hellions, you need to go ahead and scout maybe the drones at the 3rd base, maybe the output of larva at the natural, is it roaches on the way over or not type of deal. It's not really that dangerous of an opening, it feels. Now, going for a 3rd CC as well behind this is just increasing your chances that Impact goes, well, F you too, buddy. But, yeah, it's like totally doable to make this work, I guess, is always the end result, right? Like, as long as your scouting's on point and reactions, you actually know how to react to things, then it is possible to always make this stuff work, but this is pretty greedy. Impact did not see the 3rd CC, unfortunately for him, but he saw that there was 2 more factories being produced. It's really important, so he knows it's mech. He knows the 3rd CC because there wasn't any starport. There's barely any supply on the front lines. Like, he knows it, even if he didn't see it. His choice to try and combat this, by the way, was not to just go, like, haywire, like, oh my god, so many drones, 4th base stupidly quick type deal. No, it's to go for a much faster lair. Now, he doesn't have a Roach Warren with this, so I'm guessing it's going to be a very fast Muta build, in which case, even if this was Bio, even if this is Cyclones, things that are actually good at attacking air, this is still going to potentially get out of hands. Like, this is a very strong start to the Muta count, and they shouldn't even die, right? There's, like, 0 chance they die as soon as they pop, because Fantasy might have 2 Cyclones. So I shouldn't say 0 chance, but you know what? The lair just finished with the Spire. It's early, guys. God. Can you imagine a 5-minute Spire being done, though? That's gonna be like on 2 bases, right? Alright, well, we'll see if he builds Cyclones anyways. That's the other thing I was gonna talk about. It is Cyclones. What a surprise. Every mech player seems to be doing this on this map, but then this is also the historic Fantasy versus Bly map, where there's a lot of Cyclone usage. So, now there's gonna be quite a few Cyclones, so I take back what I said about Spire. I thought I got enough sleep, and I thought I, was good to go, but apparently not. Confusing the lair time with the Spire timing when you literally look at the production tab is A+ commentary. Oh, this is a nice block on the Hellions. This is A+ blocking, That thing sarcastic. That was really good. Fantasy gives away quite a few Hellions for that, finding basically nothing. And while that does result in a Scouts, which is good news, that was still not something he really wanted to give away like that. Because the Spire isn't even, while it is fast, like this is still a consideration to make. You still have to be wary of this. with the style Fantasy chose to go, not just like turn a tank, something like that, like he's really not that worried, I don't believe. And then we know that there's a Roach Warren on the way and a 4th base and all that stuff. So it's not going to be like mass Muta, which can get out of hand even against Cyclones. It's going to be poke and prod Mutas, which, I mean, if you really are confident in your Cyclone and the ability to respond to situations quickly, you maybe technically don't even need a missile turret. But I think that would be the safer way to play. So, yeah, he's building missile turrets. Double armories. Even though the attack does not benefit the Cyclone, it still does benefit everything else. So, Hellion's not usually really caring about it so much, but it does help. It does help. Blue Flame on the way, Drilling Claws as well. Now that could be an overreaction to the Spire, but it's actually really interesting. So scan reveals that there are roaches on the way and that it's not going to be mass Muta, but I feel like you're not assuming that from the get-go most of the time anyways. Not enough to get Drilling Claws right away, right? Like to get Widow Mines, yes, because they're kind of cheap and produce quickly, so why not? But to get Drilling Claws too, this seems like more like something he's been adapting into his playstyle. Maybe it helps against counterattacks of all types, right? Like lane run buys, roach run buys, which have really destroyed his momentum in the past. Like literally Fantasy doing the style, we've seen him have to pull back against a stupid number of roaches, and that does interrupt the flow of things of how they're supposed to play Cyclones. But they are placed currently in anti-Muta positions. They aren't really helping out, kind of missing the mark on where the Mutas are going to go. And he's not building any more, so I don't know. I'll say that was for the Mutas, and I guess Drilling Claws isn't the most expensive upgrade when you're already on 3 bases going to 4, so. Alright. Okay. Alright. Ooh, Burrow's done. But Drilling Claws is not even on the way, so this is just a pop-up behind the Cyclones. Really cool stuff here. If you're off creep, they're basically guaranteed not to scan. Right? We saw literally right there, Fantasy scanned just on creep and barely missed it. So it's a bit of a gamble, because what if they scan a little premature, but it worked out really well. Getting behind the Cyclones is death for the Cyclones, basically. They're only effective when they're able to lock on and then run away. And even then, the Cyclone count isn't that high right now. So a little scary. Looks like there was a canceled command center due to Lings or something like that, but he was going to put it back in location, decides not to. I don't know if Fantasy heard / saw that burrow. Seems like he did not see it. Mute is still being used despite being basically in that kind of worthless count. Like 5 won't really ever do very much if there's 1 missile turret, and there is. Fantasy didn't skimp on those. Looks like he figured it out. I mean, there was also like a scan to see if there was 1 burrowed at the 4th base too, but that was a nice scan to clean things up or send things packing. Hellions do have Blue Flame, so 1 Spine Crawler will not stop the drone carnage. Roasty toasty. Not a whole lot though. Not a lot. In fact, not even worth that many Hellions, technically. Once again with Burrow, Impact is just, this is an awesome style to use. And then, you know what he's doing behind it? He's getting an even better Zerg style. So Koreans, it's weird, right? We saw, I mean, mostly Rainer at this point. We haven't really seen a lot of other TVZs that have gone so deep into the Cyclone metas of the European qualifiers and American qualifiers, but it feels like Koreans like Infestors versus this, and Rainer / Europeans like Vipers versus this, which is kind of funny. But it's like TLDR spellcasters. That's what we learned from Dark in the last IEM Korean server qualifier, is that he didn't even, I don't think he ever went for Vipers. Well, not in the first game that he played against TY. He just used Infestors. But Impact is going to go for both, and I do think that's the best way to do it. If you can afford it with the gas, and they're expensive on the gas, then spellcasters are the way to go, man. That Infestor was still on creep, a little unfortunate. The scan went down to clear up creep, because clearing up creep is an important part of this. Like this has not been a game determined yet, but it really, if you look at this grand scheme of things, it does not look good for Fantasy, who maybe has decent upgrades, maybe has his own 4 bases, right? But, you know, from what we've seen in the past, it's not great. Like, the creature's not cleaned up, so Impact's getting advance notice of all these attempted run buys. And really, by this point, the Cyclones would have loved to have taken at least 1 hatchery down. They're now getting fungled, which is bad news. This is how the army of Impact actually takes the trades it's supposed to. Even as Fantasy is like, okay, you can keep running into me, like, this is fine for me. I'm a little surprised Impact is this bold. Yeah, in fact, even he's like, okay, maybe I shouldn't have done that. There wasn't enough fungals to make that work. This is kind of the first time where I've really been on the side of Fantasy's trade then, you know? It's the first time it really looked good. Here comes some Vipers, though. I know there's other spellcasters. They're going to abduct the Cyclones, and when there's... Like, every Cyclone really does count here, and they go down so quickly, too. And those abducts were good. The Vipers live. They weren't locked on. More Zerg army is coming through here, and Fantasy's desperately trying to remax, and it's a pretty quick remax, or it's quicker, right, than tanks. It's still going to be a little bit of a struggle. Vita's finally going to give up their lives trying to kill a refinery. Exactly. You'd expect. Even, okay, I thought they were just going to be sacked, but he saves the one. You get to live, I guess. But right, going back to just the overall state of things, Fantasy's on his 5th base, or, well, not really. He's getting to his 5th base. He's getting to his final upgrade here. The creep spread is still very good for impact. His combination of units is going to be very good as he kind of just remaxed with the entire process. You know, while he was losing army, he was replacing it. And he has his bottom left base, which Fantasy hasn't even had time to go over there to try and harass. No run-bys have happened in quite some time. There's spying close against them anyways, so it'd have to be a rather committed run-by. And everything is looking good for Impact, who is also, I was going to say, another thing you could do against this is going to Broodlords. Makes it very tricky. He's also adding on a 2nd Spire, although did he forget he had one already? Because I would have expected that to turn into a Greater Spire by now. Well. Roaches not going to be able to burrow to get out of this one. They are just found really awkwardly, and this is going to be a huge win for Fantasy. That is still a considerable number of roaches to give away. Impact's not banking an extreme amount quite yet, but it is still roaches, and Impact's just going to be like, oh, whoops, and kind of live with it. Abduct's going to come down into what is still a big enough army to take down Cyclones. The one Viper goes down to a lock-on, as Fantasy would love to get a lock-on every time this happens. It's about, you know, being able to react quick enough. And so far, it's been Impact on the aggression. Impact kind of finding Fantasy and being like, aha, gotcha. Oh, my good lord. Okay, so these Aliens get some really nice shots. 15 is still not that bad for Impact. Fantasy's at 84 workers, by the way. Like, he is going to be able to replace the army that he loses almost as fast as Impact will. It's just that whenever there is one big push of everything together, and, you know, God forbid Fungals also come down here again, that's when Fantasy's army really plummets. But Impact this is the 2nd time that he's been a little over eager. You know, he takes the good initial fight, says, okay, this is working out for me, and then he stays a little too long, especially without his spellcasters being ready to go. Spellcasters really are quite important in this. We're getting the last attack upgrade for the Hellions. His Impact now finally adds on his Greater Spire. I think he did just forget he had already had a Spire. It's not upgrading, and it's not... It would have been the Greater Spire before this one. So that's a... It's like a funny thing that happens, right? Like Terran's building a 2nd armory after a held out attack. So that does severely delay what could have already been Corruptors out and Broodlords on the way, but it's not like Impact was in danger of losing this game. Even if Fantasy had been able to push farther in, I still don't think the Impact's really at a loss. Eventually the Vipers would have regained the energy, eventually Infestors would have popped out, and, well, he might have lost a base or two, it would have still been a game. Speaking of losing a base, Fantasy's finally going to get, I think this is his 1st base kill, which when you go Cyclones is kind of impressive, and it took 15 minutes. Impact is back onto Fungals and Vipers for the Abducts. This is very scary here for Fantasy. He's got to be paying attention to his army at all times. Abducts go down. Not quite any Fungals yet. In fact, a bit of miscontrol. There we go. As the Fungals finally come down, that's when a very small number of Roaches and Hydras suddenly just take out a lot of Cyclones. But the reason it's so small is that there's another attack off to the left side. Splitting your army generally goes in favor of the Cyclones, but only if you're able to move away from it, and that's what's happening here. So it's like getting cleaned up, but really slowly. A lot of supply depots went down. Gas Geyser, SCVs, 4CCs being delayed. As he really wants to keep it alive and actually finish it. In fact, now upping his worker kill count quite considerably. I think that was, like, before that attack, I think that was more like an 8 kill count there. So, really nice attack by Impact to tear down Fantasy's worker count. Still at 64 on 5, going on 6 bases, is it? It's going on 7 bases? 7? Like, that's still... That's a lot to replace. Or a lot of ability to replace, but... Yeah, I don't think... Fantasy's going to be lacking SCVs. He might be lacking an army, though. Impact. Saving his spellcasters for the most part. He's saving his Vipers, anyways. Infestors keep dying. Without the Burrow Fungal, they are hard to control. 6, 8 Corruptors on the way. Fantasy knows that there's a clicking talk that is Broodlords. He has been in this situation before. We all know that, if you're watching this channel. Oh, God. And it's not that he's not reacting to them, I think. It's just that he is a type of player that thinks Cyclones can do the trick. Technically, they can. Technically. You know, if there's no Fungals or Ducks or, you know, anything on the ground to stop the Cyclones from reaching the Broodlords. But realistically, Cyclones don't do the trick. Especially when you're in this game where Impact still has all of his bases and a large army. And it's not like a scrappy game. If it's a scrappy game, then Fantasy, like, Cyclones are the best way to go. But not very scrappy. Not yet. Impact has not expanded recently, though, and that's, like, a little worrying. Well, I guess he did, but it got destroyed, right? So he does need another base soon, but now he's taking a good fight. Fungals go down. He saves the Infestors, but this time Fantasy got a lot of lock-ons on the air, so Overseers and Vipers going down there. So that was nice. That was nice for Fantasy. Impact's not replacing his Vipers, though. He's just going more into Broodlords. The Infestors no longer have Fungals. They're trying to escape, at least alive. But a scan reveals them. It's getting a little awkward. Abduct does not go down on one last Viper, and Impact is having to build something besides Broodlords here. So more Roaches and Hydras on the way. We've got Liberator harassment starting now that the Hellions have been rather unsuccessful, and that is going to do some work here. This base especially looking very vulnerable. We still have more Infestors shocking around, and Fantasy has no need to just scan the middle of the map randomly, so they should be able to follow the army until, well, until they reach over here, for instance. Impact's keeping tabs on other bases, which is a nice thing to see. You can't just let Fantasy get... If he saw these two bases already taken, that's when Impact starts to feel really bad about this game, but as it is, Broodlords are still the consideration, the potential game enders. They run Augerly into... What am I? But this is where Fantasy was able to avoid them for about, like, an hour. When he faced Bly, maybe he can do it again. He is unfortunately kind of, I don't want to say pounce upon, because Broodlords don't pounce, but he is found by the Broodlords, tackling a Roach Hydra army. We don't have many spellcasters, though. There's one Infestor with a Fungal, but all the Vipers have been killed and not replaced. Impact now struggling a little bit on those minerals. He finally has this base back and set up, but the Liberators, I think, have been going to town a little bit. Yes, they have. At least 10 more workers have been killed for Impact and a lot of denied mining time. Hellions are now running in here, too, and there's a lot of... oh, there's still a Liberator. There's a lot of Spine Crawlers. Cyclones are coming in as well, so that'll take care of that. But this fight did not go that well for Fantasy. He tried to find a situation where the Broodlords weren't protected by the ground army, and he almost did. In fact, I think he took more than 2 or maybe he took 3 out, maybe 4. He's trying to take even more, but the Queens somehow also make their way over here. How long did that take? Jesus. Okay. Hatchery does go down to the Cyclones, and the... Oh my god, no! No, the drone... You know the drones! Thought that was going to be quicker. Took a little while. But as long as there's anything on the way to clean this up, we have the army of Impact doing maybe even equal return damage on top of the Planetary, on top of the SCVs. He's got an army on the ground, an army in the sky. He's got Transfuse. He's got at least 2 Fungals, I want to say, from that Infestor, but he is certainly missing, I want to say, more Vipers, more Fungals. You have 8 Vipers in the sky right now. That's basically all the Cyclones abducted. He finally gets the Planetary, but he is maybe going to lose some of his Broodlords. That's not a large count. So the Broodlings on the ground are, well, occasionally getting surrounded by the Cyclones. They're not exactly stopping the Cyclones from locking on. It's the Transfuses that come in to save the Broodlords' lives. Still at 3. It's mostly about the ground army now. Roaches over here deny the main base. That is the main base lifted over. Even though he had a new one, he didn't turn that into a Planetary. Now looking towards this Planetary is at least denying the mining. They both have been... Oh my gosh. These Hellion run-bys have done so much damage. Okay, the 29 workers of 23 of Impact. Okay. So this is really turning into an all-in. But Fantasy, I talked about it, the scrappier game goes in favor of Fantasy's composition. He is a little split up here, but he's got this weird high ground that is super effective. He's finding Queens, and Transfuses were very helpful for a time. The Druids are all dead, and you don't really see transfuses on this type of army anymore. But anytime Fantasy accidentally runs into the army or just simply isn't paying attention to his own, so Impact can get on top of it, that's when he's going to lose some expensive units. Impact is trying to rebuild that drone count, and he's found his drones that weren't mining. He does have at least a base to mine with. My cat's very needy right now. But Fantasy has, you know, the best thing in the world. He has mules. He has command centers he can still lift. The different planetaries that were destroyed. But Impact trying to counter that potential with just taking good army trades. Has a lot more infestors here. Problem is that they seem to always get popped off. If they get a fungal, they seem to die. And that's not the trade that Impact's hoping for. So again, in fact, it's exactly what's happening. Nice control from Fantasy to try and make this work. And as soon as Impact is forced to retreat, that's when the Cyclones are really, really effective. We now have Hellions going for the kill and a hatchery. Not really going to work out here. Impact still has a couple of Queens to help. Cyclones do get fungled once again, but coming from the backside, these infestors could get roasted toasted. Oh, they do! A scan goes down, but Impact doesn't even think about burrowing them. They all die. That's it for the spellcasters. Impact's been putting all of his minerals back into building drones, but he's taking on the army. The Hydras with their range being very helpful here. Gonna take out a couple of the last Cyclones. Vikings land, but that's a situation you just run away from. It might look silly, but that's too many Vikings combined with the other army. No? Actually, no. Impact's gonna take the fight? I don't know about this. He's on so few drones. He doesn't have any gas. He can't rebuild the Hydras. And that was not a fight he wanted to take. Not just because the Vikings are oh, he's tap out. Gee. Fantasy takes game number 1. That was so weird for me to say. But it is a best of 5. Yeah, I mean, the Hydras take the fight with the Vikings or not. Fantasy was able to replace them, but he still was. I thought he was going to evacuate as soon as possible. That's why he was trying to get my attention. The door was closed. You guys couldn't see it, but he was behind me, reaching over my chair to grab my hair. Annoying. We're on to Automaton. In the top right is the yellow Zerg. It is Impact. In the bottom left is the red Terran. It is Fantasy. Honestly, one of the few games we saw that style work, but Alive was making it work in the last Korean qualifier too. So it can work. It just it seems really hard. It's like obviously everyone in this tournament's playing a hard game because it's StarCraft and they're all really freaking good at it. But you guys have to try and play Cyclones to realize how hard it is. It's like playing Bio without the easy escape of, oh my god! I'm not supposed to shout anything out during IEM, but don't tell anyone. Thank you, Jenna, for the sub gifts. Thank you very much. I love you. Okay. Anyways, so what was I talking about? Oh yeah, you guys have to try and play with Cyclones to really understand how difficult it is. You know, with Bio, you can kind of get out of there with Medivacs. You don't really lament the loss of even 16 Marines. You kind of just go, okay, well, at least I'm on 3 bases. I can replace those. But with Cyclones, they are still surprisingly delicate when they're being touched. Like Pac-Man, don't touch me, and then when you touch them, they explode. And they do, even if you don't trade them out, right? You're like, well, if they're delicate, then I won't use them. I'll just bulk them up and get maxed out, and then I'll try and win the game. That also doesn't really work. As a maxed out army, their synergy isn't nearly as good as like tanks and Vikings and Liberators, right? They still are very vulnerable to surrounds and abducts and fungals and whatnot. So you're supposed to be using them continuously, like sniping bases, taking trades whenever you possibly can, even if it's on a couple of roaches, and just like seriously continued use, possibly even more APM use than some bio pushes, because bio eventually gets a push. You know what I mean? Whereas the Cyclones don't really ever just do a push of like, hey, you come to me. You come to my tanks, like, or you come to my Widow Mines. They are the ones that have to initiate and then force Impact to try and engage, and then they escape. So it's kind of a hard style to use, even though a lot of the time it just looks like lol lock-ons. But as much credit as I'll give Cyclone users, especially when they win games, I will say that it still seems like there is a strong potential that spellcasters are just too strong of a counter, and we'll see the style die off. Impact, I think if you're to criticize him, it would be mostly about him not using enough spellcasters. His plan with the burrow earlier on was really, really cool and effective. He controlled the map at a time where it is usually most difficult to control the map, right? When you're on 4 going to 5 bases, your creep spread isn't like supposed to be as far out as it was. You're supposed to have your queen sniped, supposed to have your creep tumors cleaned up. And that, you know, was a great jumping off point for the rest of the game for Impact. But then he started to take, you know, 2 or 3 bad engagements, just straight up. He didn't truly expand all over the map, despite giving maybe more of an open opportunity to do so. You know, he probably should have gotten both the left side bases and the middle base that you usually see, but he didn't really grab. And he didn't have spellcasters. He made some, but then he lost them. And I think Infestors can be especially difficult to use like he was using them. And he was using them aggressively too, because I'm trying to compare and contrast Impact's play with Dark's play, which is on YouTube. If you haven't seen the Dark vs TY series, you can watch it on my YouTube if you would like to compare and contrast yourselves. Try and figure out what went wrong for Impact. But one thing I remember is that Dark was taking a lot of defensive fights where TY was really, really bulked up. Anyways, Hellions trying to get in here. Impact did not skimp on the Lings. He was just kind of hiding them for a second. So his Fantasy saw that. He now has to micro around them, but he has done a good job of it. Main base isn't all free spread yet, so he's able to micro around the Lings, take care of them, get a few shots off on the drones, and he's even going to go back into the natural. There's only one queen. She's going to snipe one of the Hellions, which is very important. Now putting that into a 2-shot territory instead of the 1-shot where all the drones die instantly. But she is not very good at chasing. Even as the Hellions get lower and lower, they still manage to get 1 or 2 more drones. So 6 drones in total. That was not technically worth the Hellions, but it also killed Lings, and it did probably mess up the macro a little bit more on Impact's side with all the pulls he had to do and bringing his queens every which way. So now Impact's like, okay, that was stupid. Like, let me go back to what I should be doing. So Lair starts, Roachborn starts, Extractors start, Creep Spread should start up again as well. Fantasy is doing what kind of expected. Although on Automaton, there's been a lot of Battlecruiser openers, even from, like, Bunny, for instance, so I was also kind of expecting that. But if it's not Battlecruisers, it is just right into the Cyclones, so okay, so be it. Instantly into the upgrades for the Cyclones and the Hellions, and he is once again going to the double armory. So maybe Impact has already thought about the last game and then, like, you know what, I know exactly what to improve. Maybe he thought he was supposed to win that last game and is sitting there scratching his head, but he will have to face the same exact composition and almost the same exact build order, I think. Fantasy went for a CC first and a quick third. I don't see a starport. You know what? Hold on here. Did Fantasy ever get a starport last game? Oh my god. I don't think he did. No, he did. He got Liberators, damn it. Okay. His Liberators were quite important, in fact, so my bad for forgetting them. They did a lot of harassment. But still, he does push it off for a long time, and that's not something I was really paying attention to, so that is cool. I think MVP, a long time ago, had his own starport list mech openers. The game went long enough, he had to get starports eventually, I guess, but he kind of all-in off of it. Well, this base is up there. See, this is what I thought was supposed to happen last game, and when it didn't, I was like, oh, Impact's doing a good job here. Impact had already had Burrow and Roaches, I guess, set up by that time, but it is just a cancel, not a kill. So Impact is going to have to just accept that and go back and try and take it again. He is going to go for Burrow. But Burrow really ended up falling off. There's one thing you can usually depend on when you go for this style is that you should have a couple extra scans, a couple extra command centers. Decided to go for the other base. I mean, both bases are going to be hard to keep alive. That's the nature of fantasy style, is that, you know, Cyclones lock on, things die. No matter where you take them, no matter how close you think you are to your reinforcements. But I guess this base would have been a little closer. So, one thing we didn't really get to mention in that last game, right, because it was so cool that he was popping up behind the Cyclones, but the other benefit of Burrow, the more obvious benefit of Burrow, I suppose, is that you can break the lock-on. So Fantasy would have to preemptively scan. Nice run by here. Something that was missing. I mean, there's a lot of things that are going well for both players. Like, oh, actually, you know what? It's not technically it's not going well for Impact. He didn't get the cancel. But there were some things that were missing last game from what we saw from the other TVZs that looked like this. And, you know, it was the base snipe, it was more spellcasters, whatever. It was also, I think, more run-bys doing work. Eventually, Impact, you know, he had a couple of splits when he was being aggressive with his army, but there wasn't really run-bys. So they ended up going, I think, not so favorable for him, because when you split the armies, if Fantasy doesn't mess up his own split, then Cyclones can be a lot more effective. And that's, I think, what we ended up seeing. Ling run-bys get a little more complicated, although, you know, obviously Helens are good against them. It's about having to respond to them very quickly, and especially when they get upgraded as we get into that Hive territory again, which we're almost guaranteed to do. It seems that most of our players are able to survive the mid-game, but they might be missing a limb or two, but they survive it. And they get to Vipers or Infestors or whatever. So, if we do get into like a really late game, then we should see Ling run-bys and Ling upgrades. Maybe should's a strong word, but I would like to see it. Of course, right now, it's all about the upgrades that are, you know, the most important, which is for your Roach Hydras. So 2/2's on the way. Behind that, a Fantasy. Which, again, that a 2 attack isn't really helping a whole ton, but it's doing it. It's helping. Talons get some extra damage done. Fantasy's quite good about always scanning ahead. Or, I don't know how to put it. He's always good about scanning the army so that his lock-ons don't break. Both for the Burrow and just losing sight of the army. Impact is struggling a little bit right now. His Infestor was instantly picked off. His Burrow tactics aren't working. I don't know why I get an Overseer. I guess habit? There's really no need for an Overseer, right? I'm not crazy. Anyways. Not important. What's far more important is whether or not Fantasy takes his army out or not. Like, he is in the prime position for Cyclone play. He has all of the backside of Automaton to run to if Impact does get really fed up and tries to chase after him. There's not a lot of creeps over to the 4th base for Impact to even try and chase after him, which is being a real selling point here for Fantasy sticking around. But I guess Fantasy pulls away, and this might be because he thought Impact is about to have more spellcasters or, you know, wrap around, something like that. It also could be because he needed a second, literally a second worth of time to get back into his macro. But I don't know if that's true. He has all of his production. He does let down another command center, but otherwise his production is all set up 5 cycles at a time, and he does have a rather controlled area, I guess, on the left side and the right side to abuse. This does not have a lot of creep spread either, and he got the queen in that last fight, so 4 queens for 4 hatcheries to inject. Not a lot of creep spread. Impact is struggling a little bit in this mid-game, but he is replacing the 5th hatchery. He didn't actually lose this one. He certainly has lost a lot of units trying to defend, so the resources lost is exactly what Fantasy would love to see. Half the resources lost of Impact. That's exactly what you want, but it doesn't mean the game's over. Or usually that would be a staggering amount, even in this matchup, even in the styles. As Impact did get to a Hive, question mark? Yes, he did. He has a Spire on the way. He's going to go for Broodlords faster this time. Where are the Vipers? He has the gas to get them, but he's still going for the Infestors, which they can be good as long as they're defensive, though. I don't think they're good when it comes to chasing down Fantasy's army. And honestly, I don't even know if they're that good for Impact in this. Like, Dark made them look good, but I think TY was playing a different style of the same composition. He also was going with Liberators, for instance, and really trying to set up a position, not trying to pull and poke and prod and then run away. But Impact's getting some fungals. They're not trading out as well as he was hoping for. Maybe a little bit better than before, but he's losing the Infestors, and it really bothers him to make. I think the difference is that Fantasy is getting some, like, what's the word? He's not purposely trying to target the Infestors every single time. It's just that they come on the front lines. Whereas the Vipers, I think, are a little more difficult to get the like accidental lock-ons, like the perfect lock-ons. You actually have to try and target fire them. I mean, we kind of saw it right there, but then he realizes, okay, I should get those. And it's also a matter of having lock-ons, I guess. But yeah, those Infestors are just, they're putting themselves on the front lines whenever they get fungals, and they're getting taken out. So, well, Fantasy got this base, and it is just to mine this one. I guess he doesn't need that much gas. I mean, he's already on 8 gases, right? He has extra command centers on the way. He spots this attempted Overlord drop, which is a really cool idea, but instead he's going to lose some more expensive than usual Overlords. Over here, Impact goes for the aggression, and it's working out not so bad. Fantasy's without about half of his Cyclone count. That does mean this base is going to go down, though. Basically, for sure. Infestors are popping off into the army and just going to die. They might get the fungals. Okay. But oh no. Okay, well, we're watching that go down. It looks like Impact's army was totally cleaned up. Impact down in supply, trying to get to Broodlords. Can't afford to go for Broodlords. His Vipers just died as well, but they just I regret looking at that other. I thought Impact was gonna live longer over here, but I guess I was wrong. He just lost his entire army. He lost his Vipers. He lost some Infestors. Impact is not looking good in this game. It started off better for Fantasy as well, so that's part of the reason he looks worse in this game than last game, but yeah, the battle's not going well for him at all. This is where the style really just looks powerful, but if this wasn't the qualifying match, I would say that Fantasy, if he was facing Sue, for instance, or if he was facing Dark, who's already qualified, but still, you'd see a stark contrast of how these engagements are taken. Impact is struggling against this style, and if Fantasy wins this game, I can assure you he's going to use it the third game. Maybe it depends a little on what map it is, but no, I think he'll use it on whatever map he's forced to play. Impact's trying to keep just the macro going, you know, just trying to do what he can as a Zerg player. So creep spread's on the way again, but it's not a lot, and it's always getting cleaned up. He's trying to replace bases. His worker count really hasn't been touched. I guess that's the good news. So he's been replacing 300 minerals at a time instead of 700 because he also lost drones. And he is trying to do some type of form of harassment, some nice little infested Terrans around behind the gold mineral line, but he can't make his way on the other side of the map. He can't chase after the Cyclones. He's losing all the spellcasters. I gotta imagine those Vipers were miscontrolled. Like, those were so many. But maybe he just lost the ground army before they got there. Anti-armor is used, but that was probably the best trade Impact's had in a while. The fungal was very effective on the ramp. And yeah, I just took that out pretty quickly. This is something that Fantasy didn't try to do. Not quite sure what is the difference of when you do decide to go for Liberators or not, but this game he is going to go for Liberators. We've seen this from other Terrans, faster, slower, all types of things, but you do seemingly eventually want to get to Liberators with range and upgrades. Now again, like if there was a lot of Vipers that were still trading out well, right, they're being controlled really well, they were taking trades, there's still 6 of them, whatever, then Liberators do struggle against that too. That's what we saw from some other series. But that's not the situation. And you'd think they're a lot better versus Infestors, but even saying that, Dark did well against them too with Infestors. But Dark's Dark, and I guess he's just really good. So that's going to provide actual like staging grounds for this army, whereas 99% of the time in both these games, Fantasy's been really focused on being able to escape. The Liberators, I mean, they could die and the Cyclones could still escape. The Liberators are going to provide an area that is just like actually a you come to me type thing. And I'm going to sit here, especially if the Liberator count gets high enough, right? So you have +2 ship weapons already on the way, 3 starports done to produce a lot of Liberators very quickly, building armor as well. Fantasy has just taken the map here. with some very mild harassment from roaches. He tries to go up this ramp again, and that's when Impact snaps and goes for the Infestor Fungals. I do also like that Impact's gone from mostly Hydras, which I wasn't quite paying attention to in the last game, if he was more or less Hydras. I think eventually he's gone into more and more Hydras with only a small amount of roach buffer, but just noting that I think that's what you're supposed to do. The range of the Hydras being very effective, and just... well, Hydras being good units, I guess. But they're more expensive, so they're harder to replace. Now this ends up being a strong attack. He's gotten into position before he was locked on a billion times. He decides not to engage. A couple Cyclones end up scaring him off, assuming that the other Cyclones are on their way. The correct assumption. He's gonna go for this base, so he did not get this one? How did he not get that one? That's so surprising. That's a planetary, so he gets one base and saves most of his army. But Fantasy is still on to really just great compositions for this type of game where Impact's not looking super strong. I'm totally in favor of Fantasy's Liberator transition. His economy is still strong, his upgrades are good, and, well, his bank's quite good as well. Taking the Liberators with range. A safe space for the Cyclones to always retreat back into, and even if the Cyclones had to retreat entirely, the Liberators would go down with a fight. They take out down a lot with them without the Vipers being able to abduct them. Abduct's pretty good. 3-3 is just now finishing up for Impact. He has not had nearly as strong of an economic game as last time, so can't afford really to go into Brood Lords. Although now he could, he has to lose supply, and was waiting a little while to start that 3-3. Currently just replacing Spellcasters. At this point, he absolutely needs the Abducts from Liberators. The 5 Vipers only just popped, I believe. He's not controlling this army. I'm pretty sure he wasn't controlling the army. That was a very weird fight to take because he was dealing with the Liberator. Drones are not being pushed back to mining because he's focused on this attack here. Vipers have accrued enough energy to go for a Blinding Cloud and a bunch of abducts, but really nice lock-ons means that every single Viper died. Fantasy just instantly changing targets and having the lock-on off cooldown. That is an expensive loss for Impact. A trade that he'd be willing to make, you know, might be okay if he was in a better economic position, if he had more control over the game, but as is a devastating loss. All of his gas really went into that. And Impact is going to lose here. Fantasy has replaced this base. He has 3 more command centers on the way as he is very mineral rich. Could even start aggressively taking bases. Impact's desperately going to go for this one, which has not been like found out, scouted, harassed. Fantasy's been mostly focused on the left side of the map, so maybe it's a bit of a freebie, but Impact needs more than a freebie. Yeah, that is in range of the lock-on. And Impact just GG's. He's so sad that the hatchery's in range of the lock-on, he taps out. Nah, he was pretty dead. Yeah, Impact's not... He's probably the least confident Zerg I've seen against this. Even though Raynor eventually lost to Alive. Last Korean server, Qualifier Day 1. I would still say Raynor looked confident against it. It was just, you know, really an outstanding play by Alive. Impact is the first Zerg I've seen just really, like, not have an answer. It's like he has a general idea of what the answer is, but the execution of, you know, literal micro as well as the correct amount of units and positioning and, you know, knowing when to pull back and when to engage, all of that is off. So it's like, it's close, but it's like a little bit skewed. And it's really making Fantasy's style look better than really it should. But I'm also heavily biased by the other games that have happened. There's a reason the style got popular, and it's not because they lost all the time on ladder, obviously. Like, it works. I just haven't seen the Zergs die so convincingly against it. I don't mean to be being down on Impact. It's just the truth. And Impact is not feeling good. It's not like And I mean, he probably doesn't disagree if he knew English was listening to me. He'd just be like, well, okay, yeah, but it's whatever. Like, it's a stupid style. He knows that he's having trouble, and he knows that there's something that he's missing. It's just not quite clicking. So we're on a Kairos Junction. We'll see if Impact has any further reads into the past 2 games, because he needs it right now. If he does not make it through this game, he loses 3-0. He's out of the qualifier. This is the last chance to go to IEM, unless your team wants to pay for you to go to Poland, and I don't think Impact is on a team. You said? Well, that's what Wikipedia is for, guys. No, not the League of Legends player. Get out of here. He used to be on Dead Pixels, and he used to be on Titan AX1. Okay, so these guys used to be teammates. But yeah, not on a team anymore, so I don't think Impact's going to make it to Poland unless he wins through the qualifier. In the top left, talking a lot about him, it is the yellow Zerg, Impact. In the bottom right is the red Terran, it is Fantasy. I see a lot of discussion in chat about, what Impact could be doing better, and I mean, I don't quite remember if Lings were an issue in the other series, but when you bring it up, it does sound a little familiar. At least in the beginning, Lings were probably used, but I don't think that's the key. We see a lot of discussion about, like, well, they burn the lock on, but then people are saying, like, no, he's running forward with Hellions. The truth is, I'm kind of with the guy that says they burn lock-ons, but in a perfect world type thing, where I think it happens half and half. Half the time the Lings burn a lock-on, half the times they get burnt to a crisp and look useless. So it's more like there's something to use, but then I think as we get later into the game, so maybe not last game. Last game, Impact kind of started off rough, and that was maybe a situation where Lings would have been helpful for some of those fights. The first game, for instance, I think it was just Impact was in a good position. He did not have to go for Lings. He just had to choose when to attack and when to pull back a little bit wiser. And had to actually replace the spellcasters that he lost quicker. That's my theory. It's my working theory. But I think if we compared the other series to how Impact played, I'm sure there's a lot of things to point out. But maybe one of the biggest ones is that these other guys kept their spellcasters alive, or were very quick to replace them, so that there was no in-between spellcaster engagements that might have looked okay, but could have been better if spellcasters were around. And it's actually a very interesting topic that we have a Zerg player having the struggles. We see how maybe the latter was looking more so for players who are doing this than, for instance, Dark vs. TY or Reyna versus. Reyna faced like 3 Terrans who tried it, and then it was Alive who actually won with it. Or even Bly versus Fantasy, right? We have a ton of TDZs that, with different regions that are about this style and how they worked and how they didn't, that we could compare and contrast, given all the replays, and really taking a deep look into it. But that's not what we do when we're casting a tournament right now. But it's not going to be right off the bat, Cyclone Hellion. We do have a fusion core on the way, so Fantasy does subscribe to the Battlecruiser Weekly, as he does one Battlecruiser build to throw Impact off. Impact's probably seriously considering, how the hell do I deal with these Cyclones? And instead he's going to deal with Battlecruisers. And check how a live series is going. How and what do you... you're asking me the same question, but how do you think I'm going to check? You're asking someone else? You're asking me? There's the first Battlecruiser. A bunker is made. I think he saw the Roach Warren. He did, so that is caution, which is called for, because he doesn't have a 3rd CC even walling off here, so he really needed the wall off. We don't have a 3rd CC yet at all. And while that usually is a supply depot wall for the bunker behind, I mean, one way or the other, you get a bunker. He's also getting a tank So that's... Yeah, if there was a roach push, battlecruiser would take care of it. A tank would really take care of it, and it would mean the battlecruiser can teleport and go and harass and do what it should be doing. Impact has not done any scouting as of yet. He has some lings kind of patrolling around for medevacs, liberators, Vikings, you know, what could pop out of the starport, except for a battlecruiser. That's the only thing that doesn't have to just fly literally across the map. It teleports across the map, which is exactly what it just did. Boom, there you go. Main base, not that well protected. Scorecrawler and a queen is it the usual for a Zerg player, but they gotta bring up the queens here. Yamato has not been used because it hasn't been researched, and that does seem like a mistake. I'm going to say that Fantasy doesn't make such a large mistake with a build order anyways. So that is just a decision not to go for Yamato. I think it is useful. I'm on the side of you should get it, even though I don't personally use battlecruisers that often. We do not have him going into Cyclones. We have Bio on the way, so a bit of a mix-up here. I thought Fantasy was going to do it. Cyclones again. I was wrong, but he does add in something. A little something. So second battlecruiser's on the way, and I really think Yamato is worth upgrading. Well, his build otherwise has been really close, so that's why I'm thinking it's not a mistake. It's been... Oh, now it's getting a little balanced. There we go. So Impact's going into a Spire, and he does not know what's going on here. Sees a tank kill his Ling. He has the Roachborn, he's upgrading the Roaches, but is he really going to go into Roaches, especially as he figures out that it's going to be Bio instead of the Cyclones? Not that you can't go Roaches against Bio, right? But that's kind of the automatic if you think they're going to go mech. Battlecruiser comes in, kills 2 queens, because there's not a lot of transfuse. That's down to 2 queens. 2! Battlecruiser stays a little over his profile, though. That's weird. Teleports out, though. No queen in the main base, and Impact does not have a strong reaction to the battlecruisers. He is finally starting to get those mutas, so the battlecruisers will have to temporarily stay at home or off to the side, kind of avoid the mutas. But when the mutas go to attack, or when they're dealing with one battlecruiser, that's when the other one comes in and starts to do some more harassment, because we don't have Hydras on the way, and we don't even have queens being replaced, because Impact can afford it. Impact's getting a couple extra drones to go up to 68, which is a good count, but now he needs a 4th base. And he's adding on some Roaches, but he also needs to replace his queens. There's a lot of things he could maybe stall out and replace queens instead, but okay. He is making the decisions. He still doesn't know that it's Bio. I don't know if he saw how many Marines there were. But regardless, he is now heavy into the Roaches, so 1-1's not being canceled or anything like that, not that I think it would be. Mutas find an empty mineral line. I guess Fantasy didn't realize it was a Spire?
Mineral field
really?
Completed.
What the hell is it? Oh. Yeah, okay, I didn't even realize where it was. Alright, that makes sense then. So Fantasy didn't have missile turrets against the mutas. That sucks. ICVs go down. Tank will go down here. Battlecruiser is forced to come home. Fantasy has done more worker kills than Impact for Sherzies. And is still not too sad about that. Just builds the missile turrets. Wait, he did get Yamato. When did he get Yamato? Nah, I'm seriously second guessing myself. Teleport into the series, please. Well, you know, if I was gonna take a superpower, it probably would not be teleport. Yeah, some of the people want teleport. No, not me. I want to be super strength. And he is still going to try their best to harass. It's not like Impact's going to be making any more, but 6 is still a decent number to do so. This attack on the 4th base was just something that Impact was not at all prepared for. He's slightly out of position, so Fantasy just gets that and gets out. There is another 4th base, which is the good news for Impact 67 drones. But the bad news is his army is not that high up in supply, and I don't think this attack is going to do what he's hoping it will. Corruptors were made to, I guess, deal with the battlecruisers, really, but they can't have a lot against the medevacs, of course. There really aren't a lot of medevacs, and that could be an important part of this fight, so it's even more important are the tanks and the battlecruisers hitting them now. The battlecruisers is going to be taken out rather quickly. They could have bother teleporting them a little premature to make sure that they live. So the Grub just do their job in that aspect. Now they're going on top of the medevacs. But what about the ground army? What if the ground fight? A lot of tanks still alive. SCs are dying, however. Okay, not as many as I thought there would be. As the bio army finally just pushes forward. The tanks held the line, but they were a little far back than would have been ideal. So a lot of bio was still traded out there. Impact for a 1-1 Roach all in. And it is pretty all in here. It's like not great. Even though there's 4 bases and 67 drones, that might not sound like an all in. He is heavily delaying his 2-2. He's not getting to any better units as we talk about it. No Hydras, no Infestors on the way. And he's just simply going to continue attacking in here. And since it was kind of a question mark first attack, both in its you know, the decision to go for it as well as its execution. The second attack, I don't know if it's going to look any better. 2-2 is almost done here, plus the +1 for the tanks. But Fantasy caught a little away from his tanks, means I hold them go down faster, easier than they should have. Impact still doesn't feel confident pushing up that ramp, though. He doesn't even have high ground vision, so that makes a lot of sense. There are 3 tanks. Well, there were 3 tanks over there, 1 tank over here. And a lot of Fantasy's bio was on the left side. A lot of it was also in drops. I'm going to go ahead and tackle this 4th base where Impact was trying to make this into a macro game. He's now cut down back to, I guess, what it was at, 69 workers. And Fantasy, not too happy with what could have been much better defenses against that. Should still be ultimately happy with how this has gone down. He saved his battlecruisers. He saved some of his tanks. He has 2-2 over Impact's 1-1. If he doesn't die to the next attack, then his army will be better as time goes on. Granted, he doesn't make some really silly decision-making, like pushing in armies he shouldn't. Still feeling good for Fantasy. But Impact's done... He's done work. He's made this work to a degree. 4CC is now on the way for Fantasy. His tanks are in better positioning this time. They all are going to contribute to the fight for the most part. And they're still all on the high ground, so that's really, really nice. Battlecruiser is going on top of the Roach Ravagers, exactly what they want to have happen. Corruptor's going over the missile turret in the bio is not what Impact wanted to have happen. So just free damage being done here from the Battlecruisers as some desperate corrosive bios. I think even get some of the end Ravagers instead of just the Battlecruisers. And Impact will just tap out that last fight. Not at all good